Do you ever think about those forgotten Christmas cookies Grandma made that we want back? These Christmas cookies mattered because they were shaped by her hands, shared after long dinners, and filled the house with a warmth we didn't even realize we were holding on to. What sweetness did we lose without noticing? Molasses drop cookies were one of those quiet Christmas miracles that slipped into Grandma's kitchen without ever announcing themselves. They were soft, warm, gently spiced cookies that carried the whole spirit of winter despite looking simple. Back when sugar was expensive and ingredients were stretched thin, molasses stepped in as the dependable sweetener everyone relied on. Grandma poured it like it was liquid gold, letting that dark ribbon fall into the bowl with a confidence she never questioned. She mixed everything slowly, calmly, always trusting her hands more than any recipe. A pinch of cinnamon meant whatever her fingers grabbed, and a dash of ginger meant whatever fell out, but somehow the cookies always tasted like memory. When they baked, the house filled with a warmth that felt like being wrapped in a quilt. Soft centers, lightly crisp edges, and a rich flavor that never needed frosting. These cookies made Christmas feel like Christmas, even without decorations. They were not perfect, but they were the kind that gave more than they asked for. Cornmeal tea cakes proved Grandma did not need much to create something unforgettable. They came from Depression days when families stretched every ingredient. Yet somehow they carried their magic well into mid-century holidays. Cornmeal was cheap and steady, and Grandma knew exactly how to turn it into something warm and golden. A little flour, a little sugar, butter if she had it, shortening if she did not, and suddenly the kitchen smelled like comfort. These were not the glossy cookies from magazines. They were the ones you ate warm while holding a mug of something hot. They were the just a little something. Grandma handed out long before dinner started. Cousins grabbed them first. Adults pretended not to love them as much as they did, and the plate always emptied before the table was even set. They tasted like home, like history, like lessons passed down through hands rather than recipes. And that is why people still miss them, even if they cannot explain exactly what made them special. Brown sugar butter cookies were born out of necessity but somehow tasted like celebration. When white sugar was hard to get, brown sugar stepped in and ended up creating one of the richest flavors a simple cookie could ever hold. Grandma mashed the soft sugar and butter together with a wooden spoon that looked older than everyone in the house, and the dough came out smooth and caramel-colored every time holiday kitchens were loud and chaotic. But when these cookies came out of the oven, everything slowed down for a moment. The scent drifted through the house like a reminder that even when money was tight, sweetness could still be shared. Soft centers, crisp edges, and that buttery caramel taste made them melt on your tongue like warmth itself. People want them back, not because they were fancy, but because they tasted like effort, care, and the determination to make something joyful out of very little. Vanilla tea cakes were one of Grandma's most traditional Christmas treats, and she made them with the kind of seriousness other people reserved for weddings. They looked simple, but tasted like every winter, memory rolled into one soft cookie. She would cream the butter and sugar like she was waking them up, then add the good vanilla, the kind she kept hidden like a family secret. The dough was thick and smooth, and when she rolled it into little rounds, it felt like she was planting tiny holiday moments on the baking sheet. They puffed slightly, cracked gently, and filled the house with a scent that felt like belonging. These were the cookies you sneaked before anyone noticed the plate was missing half. They were the ones you dunked in milk while everyone else set the table. Grandma never wrote the recipe down because she did not need to. It lived in her hands, her instincts, and the way she cooked for love rather than precision. That is why we want them back, for the feeling they carried as much as the flavor. Oatmeal raisin spice cookies made winter feel warmer the second you walked into Grandma's kitchen. Oats were cheap, raisins lasted forever, and the spice tin only saw the light of day during Christmas, so you knew the holidays had officially begun when she reached for it. She mixed the dough with serious determination, folding in nutmeg, cinnamon, and whatever else she thought made sense that year. The dough smelled like bottled comfort, and the cookies baked into golden-edged, soft-centered treats. No modern recipe has ever quite recreated. They were practical and filling, but also secretly tender, The kind of cookie a grandmother makes when she wants her family to feel cared for without making a big show of it. Every bite held decades of little adjustments she never bothered writing down. That is why they linger in memory. They were warmth disguised as dessert, and the holidays felt whole because of them. Pecan sandies were the kind of Christmas cookie that only came out when Grandma felt like spoiling the entire family. Pecans were not cheap, which is exactly why these cookies felt like a celebration all by themselves. When Grandma pulled out that little bag of holiday pecans, you knew it was going to be a special day. She would chop them by hand, refusing to use anything electric because she said you could feel the recipe better this way, whatever that meant. But somehow she was right. The dough was buttery and soft, almost crumbly even before it hit the oven. And when she folded those pecans into it, it felt like watching a winter ritual passed down through generations. The cookies baked up tender with that delicate, sandy texture that melted the moment it touched your tongue. They were sweet, but not too sweet, nutty without being overwhelming, and rich in a way that made you wonder how something so small could feel so luxurious. People today talk about minimalism like it is something new, but Grandma was mastering the art long before anyone made a trend out of it. She took a few ingredients and created a cookie that felt like a holiday gift wrapped in butter and memory. And the best part was that she always made them right when the tree lights were on, the music was soft, and the house felt warm in that impossible-to-describe way only December evenings can manage. These cookies were never about decadence. They were about generosity, tradition, and that rare feeling of being reminded you were loved through something baked by hand. That is why we want them back. Not because they were perfect, but because they tasted like the holidays we grew up wishing we could freeze in time. Old-fashioned ginger molasses snaps were the cookies that announced winter had officially arrived, whether you were ready or not. They were crisp, sharp, and full of a ginger heat that hit you right in the back of the throat in the best way possible. Grandma loved making these because they warmed the entire house, not just the oven. And when she opened that spice tin, everyone paid attention. Ginger was strong, powerful, and kind of bossy in the flavor department, and Grandma respected it like an old friend. She would add molasses for depth, flour for structure, and then somehow mix it all together like the dough was telling her what to do instead of the other way around. When the cookies baked, they spread into perfect little circles with those signature cracks across the top, looking like tiny maps of every winter holiday that ever mattered. And biting into one was like experiencing a whole season in a single moment. The snap, the spice, the warmth spreading down your chest like someone lit a little candle inside you. These cookies did not need decorations or frosting or fancy ingredients. They had personality. They had history. They had the kind of flavor that made you remember being a child, even if you had not thought about those years and ages. That is why they stayed in the family for generations. And that is why we want them back now. Coconut macaroon mounds were one of those Christmas treats that made you feel like the holiday table had suddenly taken a trip somewhere warm, even when the world outside was freezing and the snow was piling up like teenage drama. When canned coconut became easier to get, Grandma acted like she had just unlocked a new level in cooking. She would mix the coconut with sweetened milk or beaten eggs, shape the mixture into little snowy mounds, and bake them until the bottoms turned the lightest shade of gold. The smell alone could make anyone believe in Christmas magic. They were chewy, sweet, and rich without trying too hard. The kind of cookie you popped into your mouth between wrapping presents and pretending you had not eaten 5 already. And if Grandma dipped the bottoms in chocolate, well, that was basically a holiday miracle. These cookies were small but mighty, simple but satisfying, and they always felt like a treat meant for the kids. Even though the grown-ups always stole the last one, that is the kind of dessert people miss. The kind that feels like a warm memory even when it is still in your hand. Date nut cookies were the kind of treat that made you feel like the holiday season had a little wisdom baked into it. They were rich, chewy, and full of chopped dates and nuts that somehow tasted like grown-up sweetness even when you were a kid sneaking one off the cooling rack. Dates were a winter staple because they lasted forever without spoiling, and nuts were a holiday splurge that made the whole recipe feel like something special. Grandma would chop the dates by hand, which turned the kitchen into a sticky battlefield, but she never complained once. She said the dates were worth it, and honestly, she was right. The dough was soft, sweet, and fragrant, thick enough to feel hearty but still light enough to bake up into perfect little cookies that made you feel cozy from the inside out. When they came out of the oven, the edges were golden, the centers were chewy, and the smell immediately made the whole house feel like a place where time slowed down, just enough for everyone to enjoy the moment. These cookies were comforting, nostalgic, and slightly old-fashioned in the best possible way. They tasted like the holidays Grandma lived through, not the commercial ones we see now, but the real ones built from family and intention and whatever ingredients were available. That is what makes them unforgettable. Sweet potato spice cookies were one of Grandma's most quietly brilliant inventions, especially in African American homes, where sweet potatoes were practically a love language all on their own. Anytime there were leftovers from Sunday dinner, or if Grandma simply felt like making extra for just in case, you could bet some of them would end up in cookie form. She mashed the sweet potatoes until they were silky, then mixed them with spices that always felt like they belonged more to December than any other time of the year. Cinnamon, nutmeg, maybe a whisper of clove if the jar was not empty. The dough turned this beautiful soft orange color that somehow felt festive even before it baked. And when the cookies came out, they were tender, cake-like, and warm in a way that made you want to sit at Grandma's table forever. These cookies were special because they carried history in every bite. The resourcefulness of using what you had, the tradition of sweet potatoes in black cooking, and the joy of turning an everyday ingredient into something unforgettable. They tasted like generosity, like culture, like winter afternoons spent in a warm kitchen, and that is why we want them back. Lemon-glazed sugar cookies were the kind of Christmas treat that brightened the whole kitchen the moment Grandma pulled out a single lemon from the fruit bowl like it was some kind of secret weapon. These cookies started out simple enough, just a basic sugar dough she mixed with the same casual confidence she used for everything else, but the real magic happened at the very end. While the cookies cooled on the counter, Grandma would whisk together a bright, glossy lemon glaze that smelled like sunshine sneaking into a winter morning. She never measured the juice, she just squeezed until it felt right, and somehow it always was. When she drizzled the glaze on top, it slid over the warm cookies like a soft shimmer, settling into cracks and edges the way memories settle into old holiday traditions. These cookies did not shout for attention with sprinkles or frosting or fancy shapes. They were quiet, light, sweet, and bright, in a way that made you close your eyes for a second just to enjoy it. They tasted like the moment someone plugged in the Christmas lights for the first time each year. They tasted like Grandma's way of reminding everyone that even in the coldest season, there was still something warm to look forward to. Buttermilk drop cookies were the soft, tender little treats Grandma made when she wanted something comforting without needing to fuss with rolling pins or cutters. All she needed was a bowl of buttermilk, a splash of vanilla, a pinch of nutmeg, and that uncanny instinct she always had for knowing when a batter was ready. She would drop spoonfuls of the dough onto the baking sheet, each one imperfect and lopsided, but somehow baking into the exact shape they were meant to be. The house filled with the kind of smell that made everyone wander into the kitchen without being called. These cookies had a gentle flavor, warm and familiar, with just enough nutmeg to make them feel like Christmas, even though they were simple enough to eat year-round. When you bit into one, it was soft the way only a drop cookie made with love can be, tender in the middle and lightly golden around the edges. They were the cookies you grabbed before anyone noticed, the ones Grandma handed out while she cooked dinner, saying, "Just one," even though she always let you have two. They were small, unpretentious, and quietly perfect, the kind of cookie that lived in memory even if the recipe never made it into a handwritten card. Chocolate crinkle cookies were the Christmas cookies that looked like they had just rolled out of a snowstorm. The mid-century kitchen practically revolved around them during the holidays because they felt festive before you even took a bite. Grandma would mix the dark, fudgy dough until it was nearly black, then chill it overnight because she insisted that was the only way to make them behave. Rolling the dough in powdered sugar was always the fun part, especially when her hands got dusted like she had been handling fresh snow. As the cookies baked, they puffed and cracked, creating those beautiful little snowy lines across the surface that made every kid in the house hover near the oven window. The smell was deep and chocolatey in a way plain cocoa never quite delivers anymore, rich but never heavy, sweet but not overwhelming. When you bit into one, the outside was delicate and slightly crisp, while the inside stayed soft and brownie-like. It tasted like the holidays you remember from old photos, full of warm lights, cold nights, and something baking in the oven long before dessert was officially served. These cookies were tiny chocolate miracles, the kind you never forget even if you have not had one in years. Black walnut Christmas cookies were the kind of treat that tasted like tradition itself. Black walnuts were not something you casually bought at the store back then. They were gathered, cracked open with effort, or gifted by neighbors who knew exactly how precious they were. Their flavor was bold, earthy, and unmistakable, the kind of taste you could not fake. Even if you tried, Grandma would fold the chopped walnuts into a simple dough that let the nuts speak for themselves. When the cookies baked, the smell was deep and warm with that strong walnut scent that filled every corner of the kitchen. These cookies were not flashy or sugary. They were grown up, thoughtful, and full of the kind of flavor that made you pause for a second just to appreciate them. Every bite tasted like family stories, like winter nights spent cracking shells by hand, like the quiet pride of turning something gathered into something beautiful. That is why people still remember them. They carried more than flavor. They carried the weight of care, effort, and the kind of holiday generosity you cannot buy. Cane syrup ginger cookies were Southern kitchen legends, born in places where cane syrup sat on the counter like a trusted friend. When refined sugar was either too expensive or too precious to use freely, the syrup stepped in and gave everything a deep, amber sweetness that tasted like history. Grandma would pour it into the bowl with slow, steady hands, letting the thick syrup ribbon through the spices and flour like a little stream of caramel sunshine. Ginger was the star here, sharp and warm, softened by the syrup until it tasted bold without being harsh. The dough came together into a dark, fragrant mass she rolled into small balls and placed on the pan with the quiet confidence of someone who has made the same cookies for decades. When they baked, they spread into soft, chewy rounds with edges just crisp enough to make each bite start with a little snap. The flavor was rich, bright, warm, and unmistakably Southern. These cookies tasted like stories passed down by word of mouth, like winters in warm homes, like the sweet resourcefulness that kept families going long before recipes were ever written. Jam thumbprint cookies were Grandma's way of turning a spoonful of homemade preserves into a moment of pure holiday joy. Strawberry, peach, blackberry, whatever jam she had put up that summer suddenly became the heart of a Christmas cookie everyone waited for. Grandma would roll the dough into soft little balls and press her thumb right into the center, creating a tiny cradle for whatever jar she decided to open. The jam glistened like tiny stained glass windows once the cookies baked, warm and bubbling, filling the kitchen with a sweet fruit smell that could make anyone smile. The cookies themselves were buttery and soft, simple and comforting, the perfect base for the bright burst of jam in the middle. They were the kind of treat kids raced for and adults pretended not to love as much as they did. These cookies felt alive with memory, full of summer sweetness, preserved for winter warmth. They were proof that Grandma could make joy out of anything, even the last spoonfuls of fruit she had saved carefully through the year. Brown butter nutmeg cookies were the kind of holiday treat Grandma made when she wanted the whole house to smell like warmth. The moment she melted the butter until it turned golden and nutty, you knew something special was happening. That scent alone could make the room feel like Christmas, even before she added the sugar, flour, and the spice she guarded like treasure: nutmeg. She would grate it fresh, tapping the grater gently like she was coaxing out the last bits of magic. The dough turned soft and fragrant, full of toasty, spiced sweetness that felt like stepping into a warm hug. When the cookies baked, the edges turned crisp and the center stayed soft. each bite melting away like a memory you were not ready to let go of. They tasted old-fashioned in the best way, like something you would find only in a grandmother's kitchen, never in a store. The warmth of the brown butter and the glow of the nutmeg blended into a flavor that felt like winter evenings, quiet conversations, and the gentle kind of love that lasts long after the holidays end. Frosted Spice bars were the kind of Christmas treat that did not look fancy, but somehow felt like the heart of the dessert table. Grandma would mix the batter with every warm spice she owned, filling the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon, cloves, and ginger long before the oven was even preheated. The batter baked into a soft, fragrant sheet that made the entire house feel warmer the second she pulled it out. Then came the icing, a simple powdered sugar glaze she whisked together without measuring anything, because somehow her hands knew the exact right thickness every single time. She poured it over the warm bars and let it melt into a smooth, snowy layer that crackled slightly when you cut into it. Each bite was tender, sweet, and full of holiday spice without ever feeling heavy. These were the bars that disappeared before dinner was served, the ones adults sliced just to taste, and kids begged for seconds of. They tasted simple and comforting, the way Christmas used to feel before everything got complicated. Peanut butter press cookies were the pantry staple miracle Grandma pulled out when she wanted something sweet without making a big fuss. Peanut butter was always around, and with just a few other basics, flour, sugar, maybe an egg, she created a cookie that tasted like pure childhood. The iconic fork-pressed pattern came next, 2 quick crisscrosses that flattened the dough and left the cookies looking like tiny works of homemade art. They baked into soft, chewy rounds with just enough crispness around the edges to give each bite the perfect texture. The smell filled the kitchen with warm, nutty sweetness that made everyone hover near the cooling rack like they were magnets. These cookies were simple, practical, and unforgettable, the kind of treat that showed how a handful of ingredients could carry an entire holiday memory. Every home had a version of them, but Grandma's always tasted better, maybe because she never rushed a single step. Holiday fruit bar cookies were Grandma's gentler, kinder answer to fruitcake. Instead of being heavy or overly rich, these bars were soft, light, and filled with just enough dried fruit to make them feel festive without overwhelming anyone. She would fold chopped dates, raisins, or candied cherries into a warmly spiced batter that smelled like winter the moment it hit the mixing bowl. The bars baked into golden squares with soft centers and chewy edges, the fruit gleaming like little jewels inside. Once cooled, she sprinkled a bit of powdered sugar on top, just enough to make them look like they had been dusted with fresh snow. They were the kind of cookie that showed up at every holiday gathering without ever needing an introduction. They tasted like warmth, kindness, and the softer side of Christmas, the part built on sharing rather than showing off. These bars were nostalgia baked into every bite, a reminder of quieter holidays when dessert was about comfort more than display. Butter pecan crisps were the kind of Christmas cookie that snapped between your teeth in the most satisfying way, all thanks to Grandma's habit of toasting the pecans until the whole kitchen smelled warm and nutty. She would spread them on a baking sheet, let them roast just long enough to deepen their flavor, and then fold them into a dough rich with butter that softened the sharp edges of winter. These cookies baked thin and golden, and every bite delivered that unmistakable sweet toasty combination pecan lovers still chase today. They had none of the fussiness of decorated cookies or frosting swirls, just pure flavor that spoke for itself. Grandma kept them in old tins lined with wax paper, and somehow they stayed crunchy for days, as if the holiday spirit itself was preserving them. Anyone lucky enough to sneak one before dinner knew exactly why these crisps were a treasure tucked into nearly every December. Cornflake Christmas cookies were one of those mid-century inventions that made you wonder how anyone ever thought of using breakfast cereal in a holiday recipe, and then immediately realized they were onto something good. Grandma would crush the cornflakes just enough to keep their crunch, folding them into a sweet, sticky mixture that turned into golden mounds of crispy bliss. The sugar-coated cereal gave each bite a kind of delicate crackle, the kind you could hear if the house was quiet enough. These cookies were fun without trying to be fancy, and affordable without tasting plain, They were the kind of treat kids grabbed with both hands and grown-ups pretended they were just okay, even while reaching for a second. Their texture alone made them unforgettable, the perfect mix of chew and crunch wrapped in holiday sweetness. Chocolate oat no-bake cookies were the heroes of every Christmas season when the oven was already jammed with pies, hams, and whatever else Grandma decided needed to bake for 2 hours. She would melt butter, cocoa, sugar, and oats together in one pot, stirring until the mixture thickened into something fudgy and irresistible. Then she dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper, letting them set into chewy clusters that tasted like chocolate, comfort, and chaos all rolled together. These cookies cooled fast, which made them a lifesaver when company showed up unannounced or someone needed a quick dessert. They were rustic, imperfect, and entirely addictive in that way only Grandma's emergency cookies could be. They stuck to your fingers a little, stuck to your memories a lot, and filled the house with a sweetness that never needed an oven timer. Cinnamon sugar crisps were the kind of cookie that made the whole house smell like Christmas long before anyone saw them cooling on the counter. Grandma would roll the dough thin and coat it generously with cinnamon and sugar until the surface sparkled like something out of a holiday card. When they baked, they puffed just a little and crackled at the edges, creating a texture so light and fragile it felt like biting into a sugared snowflake. The cinnamon warmed you from the inside out, and the sweetness hit at just the right moment. These were the cookies people snacked on while trimming the tree or wrapping presents, the ones you swore you would eat just one of and then quietly took 3 more. They had no frosting, no decorations, no tricks, just simple, perfect flavor Grandma never once changed. Old-style shortbread rounds were the definition of simplicity, but they somehow felt like the most luxurious treat on the table. Grandma would blend butter, sugar, and flour with the kind of patience only she possessed, working the dough by hand until it came together smooth and soft. She shaped the rounds using bottle tops or biscuit cutters, pressing them into perfect circles that baked into buttery, melt-in-the-mouth cookies. Their edges were never entirely uniform, and that was half the charm. Shortbread did not need bells and whistles, just care and time. 2 things Grandma always made room for in December. Each bite tasted like pure butter drifting across your tongue, warm and rich and comforting in a way only old-fashioned recipes can achieve. Maple syrup cookies were winter wrapped in dough, the kind of cookie that tasted like the quiet warmth of a snow day spent indoors. Grandma would pour maple syrup, sometimes homemade, sometimes store-bought, into the mixing bowl, letting its deep sweetness sink into every part of the batter. The cookies baked into soft, fragrant rounds that carried that unmistakable maple aroma, sweet but never overwhelming. They were the kind of treat you paired with hot tea or warm milk, eating slowly so you could enjoy every bite. Their sweetness was gentle, earthy, and comforting, the kind of flavor that settled into memory long after the cookies were gone. They tasted like fireplaces, wool blankets, and holiday evenings where everything felt calm for once. Vanilla bean snowball cookies looked like little ornaments dusted in powdered sugar, and Grandma always made them melt the moment they touched your tongue. She would scrape a real vanilla bean, back when they were still a special treat, and mix the seeds into a soft, buttery dough. The cookies baked into tender, crumbly rounds she rolled in powdered sugar while they were still warm, giving them that snowy coat everyone recognized instantly. They were small, light, and rich all at once, tiny treasures that disappeared fast from every holiday plate. When you bit into one, the vanilla bloomed across your senses, soft and fragrant, reminding you why some recipes stay alive even when they are forgotten on paper. These cookies were delicate, nostalgic, and impossible not to love. Honey Spice Buttons were the little chewy cookies Grandma made when she wanted something sweet but not sugary. Honey was the main sweetener, thick and golden, warming the dough with its floral richness before she added cinnamon, cloves, or whatever spices she had left in the cabinet. The cookies baked into small, round bites that were soft in the center and lightly crisp around the edges. Their flavor was deep and cozy, a gentle sweetness wrapped in warm spice. These were the cookies she kept in jars on the counter, the ones you snuck when you thought she was not looking. They tasted like comfort, like quiet evenings, like winter nights where the only light came from the tree glowing in the corner. Crispy lard cookies might sound strange today, but back then they were a holiday staple because lard gave them a texture butter could not quite copy. Grandma used what she had, and what she had made magic. She mixed the dough until it turned smooth and whipped, then rolled it out thin to cut into shapes that baked into light, crisp cookies with just a hint of richness. The flavor was subtle but satisfying, and the texture was unmatched, delicate, airy, and perfectly crunchy. These cookies proved that humble ingredients could create something extraordinary. They were the kind of treat families remembered long after lard disappeared from most kitchens. Molasses raisin chews were the soft, sticky treasures Grandma kept tucked inside her worn tin that always seemed to refill itself. The dough was dark and fragrant with molasses, warm spices, and just enough raisins to give each bite a little burst of sweetness. As they baked, they filled the house with that familiar molasses warmth that lingered long after the oven turned off. The cookies stayed chewy for days, their edges firm but never hard, their centers soft enough to feel like comfort itself. They tasted like old-fashioned Christmas, the kind rooted in memory rather than decoration. Every cookie in that tin held a story, and every bite felt like opening one. Handwritten recipe cards pulled from a tin box were one of Grandma's most treasured tools, even though she never treated them like anything fragile. The box was old, dented, and faded, but inside lived the entire memory of her kitchen. Each card carried soft edges, smudges of flour, and notes written over years of trial and adjustment. She pulled the box down every Thanksgiving, sorting through the cards quickly until she found the right one. Sometimes she read it carefully. Other times, she just glanced, using it more as a reminder than a guide. Kids loved asking about the cards, and she always let them hold one gently, smiling as they traced the handwriting. Those cards held her patience, her practice, and the wisdom she inherited from cooks before her. No digital recipe could ever replace their warmth or their history. Every dish she made felt touched by that old tin box. Ginger ale. Glazed ham shimmered like a holiday jewel. Coated with brown sugar and basted with ginger ale, it baked into a glossy, golden masterpiece that perfumed the house with warmth and spice. The soda added sweetness and a subtle tang, caramelizing perfectly in the oven's heat. Often served alongside turkey for large family gatherings, it was the dish that meant abundance, 2 main courses instead of one. The glaze formed a sticky, crackling crust that guests remembered long after the meal. For many mid-century families, this ham symbolized celebration without extravagance, transforming an everyday cut of meat into something grand. Today, it's rare to find on Thanksgiving tables, but its sparkle still lingers in family recipe boxes. Ginger ale glazed ham was proof that a little creativity could turn any meal into a feast. Caramel apple trifle turned the season's best flavors into a showpiece. Cubes of buttery pound cake were layered with spiced apples, caramel pudding, and whipped cream. Each layer glistened in clear glass bowls, a celebration of color and comfort. It was elegant enough for dinner parties, yet simple enough for home kitchens. The smell alone, cinnamon, brown sugar, butter, drew everyone closer. Every bite was soft and rich, the sweetness deepened by a hint of tart fruit. Families made it for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and every occasion in between. In a decade known for convenience, this dessert managed to feel special without being complicated. It captured the heart of 1970s gatherings, where beauty met practicality and tradition met innovation. Caramel apple trifle reminded everyone that celebration did not need excess, only intention. Served chilled, it tasted like the warmth of a family gathered together, layered, imperfect, and endlessly good. Parsleyed potatoes were proof that simplicity could sparkle. Small new potatoes were boiled until tender, then rolled through a bath of melted butter until their skins shone. A generous handful of fresh parsley was tossed in at the end, its bright green flecks turning the humble dish into something quietly festive. The scent rose warm and buttery, a gentle promise of comfort that drifted from the kitchen to the table. Each bite was soft, salty, and clean, a small pause between the heavier flavors of gravy and roast. They were never the centerpiece, but they grounded every plate, steady, dependable, and full of quiet charm. Housewives in the 1940s and 1950s loved them for their ease and beauty, a way to make an ordinary dinner feel like a feast. They were served from enamel bowls, steaming and fragrant, a green promise of freshness in the middle of winter. Parsleyed potatoes were the kind of food everyone took for granted until the bowl was empty. Humble, pretty, and timeless, they turned every Christmas meal into something balanced, comforting, and complete. Savory pastries have always been a mark of refined entertaining. While desserts often dominate Valentine's Day, elegant appetizers once played just as important a role. In the mid-20th century, small, handcrafted tarts filled with rich, tangy cheeses were a staple at romantic dinners and cocktail parties alike. They were a way to start a meal with sophistication, bite-sized, decadent, and just enough to whet the appetite. Goat cheese, with its creamy texture and slight tang, was a natural choice. Though commonly associated with French cuisine, it gained popularity in the U.S. during the 1960s, as Americans developed a taste for more artisanal dairy products. Pink peppercorns, often mistaken for true pepper, added a floral heat, while honey balanced the sharpness. The result was a tart that was bold, delicate, and undeniably gourmet. So why aren't these little bites still a Valentine staple? One reason is shifting food trends. By the late 20th century, cheese boards replaced carefully crafted cheese tarts, offering the same flavor profile with less effort. At the same time, home entertaining changed. Fewer people were making intricate appetizers from scratch. Grasshopper pie, minty and bright, offered a refreshing departure from traditional desserts, captivating with its vibrant green hue and creamy texture. Its decline can largely be attributed to changing dessert trends that favor less artificially colored and flavored options. The rise of culinary sophistication has seen a shift towards desserts that highlight natural ingredients and artisanal craftsmanship, leaving behind those with a reliance on food coloring and pre-made mixes. Furthermore, the pie's association with retro dining trends makes it less appealing in a market that constantly seeks the next innovative dessert. Despite this, grasshopper pie's unique flavor profile and potential for a more natural ingredient-based revival could reintroduce it to a new audience looking for a blend of nostalgia and modernity. Using the good china without fear was one of those elegant traditions only Grandma could balance between formality and warmth. All year, the china stayed tucked behind a glass cabinet door, resting on velvet like fragile treasures. But on Thanksgiving, she opened that cabinet with confidence, believing special things were meant to be used. Each plate glowed under the dining room light, and she handled them with an ease that made everyone else relax. She never hovered or worried. To her, using the good china was a way of honoring family, making the day feel worthy of beauty. She laid each plate on fresh linens and paired them with polished silver, letting even the kids help carefully because she wanted them to learn the joy of holding something precious. Holidays, she believed, were for sharing, not protecting. And somehow, despite their age, the plates rarely chipped. That ritual made the meal feel grown up and timeless, something people remembered long after the food was gone. Eating from those plates felt like stepping into tradition. Scalloped oysters were the pride of seaside Thanksgivings, a dish layered with memory, comfort, and quiet elegance. Fresh oysters were shucked by hand, their salty liquor saved to moisten the layers of buttered cracker crumbs that surrounded them. Every layer glistened with cream, butter, and a touch of black pepper before being baked until the top turned golden and crisp. The aroma filled the house, rich, briny, and buttery all at once, like a meeting of the ocean and the hearth. In the 1800s and early 1900s, this dish symbolized refinement, served in silver dishes at hotels or in simple casseroles on coastal family tables. Each bite was a harmony of textures, the crunch of crumbs, the softness of oysters, and the silken warmth of cream. Inland families would sometimes make it with canned oysters, preserving the flavor even far from the shore. It was indulgence made accessible, a way for modest homes to taste luxury. Over time, as oysters grew expensive and palates shifted toward lighter fare, scalloped oysters slipped quietly from the holiday menu. Yet its spirit remains in old cookbooks, handwritten in fading ink beside notes like "Papa's favorite." For those who remember, it was more than food. It was a celebration of place and tradition, a dish that carried the ocean to the table. Chocolate peppermint roll was the showstopper of every holiday dessert table. A light sponge cake baked flat and rolled with a creamy peppermint filling, it looked like something from a glossy 1970s magazine ad. The swirl inside revealed its story, a perfect balance of rich chocolate and cool mint, made to impress, but easy to love. The aroma filled kitchens with festive warmth, the kind that made people linger just a little longer near the oven. Cooks dusted the top with powdered sugar or drizzled thin ribbons of chocolate glaze for that final elegant touch. It was the dessert that made guests pause before cutting, admiring the spiral as if it were art. Making it was a test of care. The cake had to be rolled while warm, the filling spread with confidence. When sliced, it held its shape beautifully, soft, light, and filled with joy. For homemakers of the 70s, it was proof that creativity and precision could coexist. Served chilled, it was as refreshing as it was decadent. One bite felt like winter wrapped in sweetness, cool, rich, and entirely unforgettable. Browned butter carrots with dill were sunshine on a winter table, a dish that brought a touch of color to the gray days between holidays. Fresh carrots were peeled, sliced, and boiled until tender, their natural sweetness just beginning to show. Then came the magic. The butter left to brown in a skillet until nutty and fragrant, releasing a smell that felt both warm and indulgent. The carrots were tossed in the bubbling butter, shimmering as they took on that deep golden hue. A scattering of dill finished the dish, green flecks bright against the orange glaze. The taste was balanced and pure, sweet from the carrots, rich from the butter, and lightly herbal from the dill. It was simple enough for a weeknight, yet elegant enough for a Christmas spread. In 1950s kitchens, this dish was considered sophistication on a budget, proof that presentation mattered just as much as effort. Served steaming beside roasts and gravies, browned butter carrots with dill caught the light like jewels, small reminders that beauty could come from the simplest ingredients. Few dishes strike the balance between comfort and luxury, quite like macaroni and cheese. A staple of American home cooking for over a century, it was originally a simple, affordable meal. But by the mid-20th century, home cooks looking to impress began adding gourmet ingredients, none more decadent than lobster. Lobster itself has had a dramatic culinary evolution. Once considered peasant food, it became a luxury item by the early 1900s, appearing in fine dining menus and special occasion recipes. Combining it with mac and cheese was a statement. The richness of lobster paired with creamy, cheese-laden pasta created a dish that was indulgent but familiar, elevated yet approachable. As lobster became more expensive, its place in home cooking dwindled. At the same time, mac and cheese shifted toward either quick stovetop versions or gourmet truffle-infused restaurant dishes, leaving this mid-century classic in the middle ground. But some flavors deserve a comeback. Because while steak might say fine dining, nothing says thoughtful comfort quite like a perfectly baked dish of mac and cheese, with just enough lobster to remind you it's still a special occasion. Originally created for Queen Victoria's Jubilee, Cherry's Jubilee brings a royal touch to the table, making its historical significance part of its charm. It can easily be adapted into a non-alcoholic version for family-friendly events, ensuring its universal appeal. Serving it over ice cream is classic, but layering it in parfaits or as a crepe filling adds a creative twist. The flambe technique not only captivates diners with its dramatic presentation, but also enhances the dessert's rich flavors. While traditional recipes feature cherries, variations using different fruits or liquors invite customization. cherries, Jubilee's blend of history, versatility, and theatrical presentation keeps it a beloved classic, offering a special experience for today's diners seeking both tradition and innovation. Cranberry sauce cooked on the stove was one of the most quietly powerful things Grandma made because it proved how a simple handful of berries could become something meaningful with just a little time and patience. She would pour the cranberries into a pot, listening to the soft rattle as they hit the bottom, then add sugar and water in amounts she never bothered measuring. As the pot warmed, the berries burst open one by one with tiny pops that sounded like miniature fireworks, filling the kitchen with a sweet, tart aroma that wrapped itself around everyone who walked by. She stirred slowly, watching the mixture thicken into a deep red sauce that shimmered under the kitchen light. It was never too sweet, never too sour, always balanced in that way only Grandma could manage. Even when there was a canned version sitting in the pantry, she insisted on making it from scratch because she believed some parts of Thanksgiving needed a human touch to matter. When she spooned it into the serving bowl, it looked like a jewel next to everything else on the table, bright and festive without trying too hard. Kids who swore they hated cranberries would sneak tastes, discovering that Grandma's version was nothing like the canned jelly they had seen elsewhere. It paired perfectly with turkey, dressing, and rolls, bringing all the flavors into harmony. That simple pot of berries showed how Grandma turned even the smallest tasks into something beautiful, making Thanksgiving perfect not with extravagance, but with intention. Pumpkin chiffon pie brought lightness to a holiday known for richness. Created in the post-war era, it reimagined the classic pumpkin pie into something airy and elegant. The filling was whipped with egg whites or gelatin, giving it a soft, cloud-like texture that melted in the mouth. It represented innovation, America's shift toward modern, refined desserts. Housewives embraced it as the perfect blend of tradition and progress, offering all the pumpkin flavor without the heaviness. The glossy, golden filling sat in a flaky crust, often topped with whipped cream swirls. Served chilled, it was a refreshing finish to a day of feasting. As time went on, traditional pies reclaimed the spotlight, and this airy cousin quietly disappeared. But for a few shining decades, pumpkin chiffon pie was Thanksgiving sophistication on a plate, a reminder that even old traditions can take flight. Cranberry cream tart was the dessert that proved tart could still mean tender. A buttery crust baked crisp, filled with smooth cream and crowned with sugared cranberries that glistened like rubies. The balance was everything. The sweet richness of the filling softened by the berries' sparkle of acid. Each slice was a reminder of holiday beauty done simply. Bakers in the 1970s loved its elegance, the way it looked more complicated than it was. Served chilled, it cut clean and perfect, the kind of dessert you served with pride. Cranberries popped softly between your teeth, their flavor bright against the velvety cream. It was festive, but refined, charming but effortless, exactly what the era celebrated. The cranberry cream tart wasn't just a recipe, it was a portrait of the season, graceful and full of light. Creamed leeks were quiet luxury, the kind of side dish that whispered instead of shouted. Long, pale stalks were trimmed, sliced thin, and simmered slowly in butter until they turned soft enough to collapse at the touch of a spoon. A pour of cream followed, turning everything velvety and pale gold. A hint of nutmeg deepened the flavor, while a dash of salt brought out the leek's natural sweetness. The scent that rose from the pan was delicate and buttery, a perfume of patience and care. Served warm beside roast chicken, fish, or turkey, it brought elegance to any table without ever showing off. In the 1960s, this dish was considered sophistication for those who knew simplicity's secret. That real flavor came from time, not trickery. It gleamed softly under the holiday lights, a quiet contrast to the heavy roasts and casseroles beside it. Every bite was tender, smooth, and deeply comforting. Creamed leeks were forgotten grace, a dish of restraint, warmth, and quiet pride, proving that the simplest vegetables could taste like celebration. Savory dishes have always had a place in Valentine's Day celebrations, even if desserts tend to steal the spotlight. In mid-century America, a romantic meal wasn't complete without a carefully crafted pastry dish, and tarts fit the bill. With their delicate crusts and rich fillings, they offered elegance without requiring the grandeur of a multi-course feast. Tomato and basil, a combination rooted in Mediterranean cuisine, brought both vibrancy and depth to these creations. Tomatoes were once considered an aphrodisiac, earning them the nickname love apples in 16th century Europe. Paired with aromatic basil and a velvety cream base, they turned a simple tart into something special. For Valentine's Day, these dishes were often shaped into hearts or decorated with carefully arranged tomato slices for an extra romantic touch. So why don't we see these savory tarts on modern Valentine's menus? For one, trends shifted toward either indulgent desserts or high-protein entrees, leaving little room for in-between dishes. Additionally, the rise of fast, grab-and-go meals made from scratch pastry feel like a lost art. Bananas Foster, a flamboyant dessert known for its dramatic tableside preparation, has seen a decline due to the decrease in formal dining experiences and the rise of DIY dining trends. The spectacle of flambeing, while impressive, requires a level of skill and safety precautions that may deter home cooks. Additionally, the dessert's reliance on rich ingredients like butter, sugar, and rum contrasts with the growing preference for lighter, fruit-based desserts. The shift towards quick and easy recipes for home entertainment has also contributed to its reduced popularity. Nonetheless, Bananas Foster remains a beloved classic for special occasions, suggesting that with innovative adaptations, it could regain popularity among those seeking to recreate restaurant-quality experiences at home. Pumpkin pie made from scratch was a dessert Grandma approached like a ritual, never rushed and never improvised. She roasted the pumpkin herself if she could find one early, cutting it open carefully and scooping the seeds before sliding it into the oven until it softened into something sweet. If she used canned puree, she still seasoned it with her own blend of spices, never a pre-mixed version. Cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and something only she knew the exact amount of. She stirred everything in her old bowl until it turned silky, then poured it into a crust. She rolled herself, pressing the edges with her fingertips. The kitchen warmed with the scent of pumpkin and spice drifting through the house. When she pulled the pie from the oven, the center wobbled softly, a sign it was ready. She never cut it right away, insisting it needed time to settle. And when it finally reached the table, that deep autumn orange meant everyone was about to taste something rooted in history and care. It was not rushed or modern. It was Grandma captured in flavor and patience. Carrot and raisin salad was sunshine in a bowl, bright, wholesome, and bursting with cheer. It appeared on mid-century Thanksgiving tables like a welcome breath of freshness among casseroles and gravies. Shredded carrots gleamed orange and crisp, their sweetness amplified by plump raisins and a creamy dressing made from mayonnaise, sugar, and sometimes lemon juice. The mix was simple but magical, its sweetness balancing the savory dishes around it. Housewives cherished it for its ease. No cooking, no fuss, just a quick toss and chill. It represented a time when beauty and thrift walked hand in hand, when even the humblest ingredients could create color and joy. Some families added pineapple or coconut for extra brightness, others kept it plain, just as their mothers did. Served in glass bowls or on lettuce leaves, it caught the light like edible sunshine. Children loved it most, eating it between bites of turkey and mashed potatoes, smiling at its sweetness. Over the years, as salads turned green and health trends changed, this cheerful orange classic slipped quietly away. But to those who remember, its taste is pure nostalgia. Afternoons filled with laughter, linoleum floors warm under bare feet, and family gathered close. Carrot and raisin salad wasn't just food, it was happiness served cold. Scalloped cabbage was the farmhouse miracle that turned thrift into comfort and simplicity into celebration. Heads of cabbage were sliced, boiled until soft, then layered into a buttered dish with milk, flour, and crumbs before being baked to perfection. The top browned into a crusty layer, while the inside turned creamy and delicate. The scent that rose from the oven was quiet but comforting, a promise of warmth on a cold day. Each bite blended sweetness, salt, and cream. The humble cabbage transformed into something rich and gentle. It was food born from care, made to stretch what little the pantry offered. Farmers' wives passed it down through generations, teaching that love was measured in time, not luxury. Served beside roast ham or potatoes, it filled the table with modest grace. Scalloped cabbage was the memory of hard winters and soft hearts, a dish that spoke softly but lingered long, reminding everyone that simple food can hold the deepest kind of beauty. Cherry snowball cookies looked like little gifts dusted in sugar and surprise. Beneath their powdery white coating hid a secret, a single bright red maraschino cherry glowing in the center. Each bite revealed that pop of color against the pale, buttery dough, a tiny burst of sweetness inside something so simple. They were rolled by hand, baked just long enough to stay soft, then showered in powdered sugar until they looked like winter itself. Children loved them because they felt like magic, and adults loved them because they tasted like home. These cookies were part of the 1970s charm. Festive, easy, and endlessly cheerful. They appeared on every Christmas platter beside fudge squares and candied nuts, and no plate felt complete without them. Making them was almost as fun as eating them, sticky fingers and all. Cherry snowballs weren't extravagant, but they didn't need to be. They were joy wrapped in sweetness, proof that the simplest surprises are sometimes the most beautiful. Viennetta, with its elegant layers, once defined the pinnacle of frozen desserts, offering a sophisticated alternative to the everyday ice cream treat. The introduction of an array of gourmet frozen desserts and artisanal ice cream options overshadowed Viennetta's once unique appeal. Additionally, changes in consumer preferences towards customizable and varied dessert options made Viennetta, which offers limited flavors and variations, less attractive. Its decline also reflects broader shifts in the dessert market, where consumers increasingly seek out desserts that offer both visual appeal and a complex array of flavors, something Viennetta's simple elegance no longer fulfilled for many. What better way to declare love than with a dish literally shaped like a heart? By the mid-20th century, creative home cooks were turning classic dishes into symbols of romance, and wrapping salmon in golden puff pastry was one way to impress. Salmon en croûte, essentially the French take on a Wellington, was the perfect balance of elegance and comfort. The combination of flaky pastry, creamy, dill-infused filling, and tender fish made it a standout for special occasions. And in true mid-century fashion, shaping it into a heart added an extra touch of flair. But as food trends shifted, so did our definition of romantic meals. By the 1990s, heavier, buttery dishes fell out of favor as lighter seafood preparations became more popular. Add to that the growing preference for quick, no-fuss meals, and suddenly rolling out pastry and carefully crimping edges didn't seem worth the effort. Yet, for those who appreciate the lost art of cooking with a bit of drama, this dish deserves a revival. After all, if love is worth celebrating, shouldn't dinner be just as memorable? Tropical fruit ambrosia trifle was the 1970s holiday dream in a glass bowl. Layers of soft sponge cake, whipped cream, coconut flakes, and canned tropical fruit, pineapple, mandarin, and cherries, created a riot of color and flavor. Each spoonful offered sweetness and light, cool and creamy with a tang that brightened the table. It was dessert as spectacle, a centerpiece of abundance that felt exotic and festive at once. In an age of convenience foods and canned delights, ambrosia trifle married ease with elegance. Housewives stacked it with precision, making each layer visible through the glass, proud of their creation. Coconut gave it texture, the syrup from the fruit adding sweetness that felt like sunshine trapped in winter. Families admired it before digging in, spoons clinking as they reached for the best layers. It was a dessert that brought the tropics home, offering escape and comfort in the same breath. Light, nostalgic, and joyfully colorful, tropical fruit ambrosia trifle was the spirit of 1970s celebration, bright, bold, and beautifully alive. Putting walnuts in the stuffing was one of Grandma's little signatures. a small detail that turned her dish into something unmistakably hers. She would crush the walnuts by hand, just enough to give them texture without overpowering the rest of the ingredients. Then she folded them into the mixture with an ease that came from years of perfecting her craft. The moment that stuffing hit the oven, the warm, nutty smell drifted through the house, subtle but unforgettable. At the table, the walnuts added a quiet crunch that surprised people who forgot she always used them. They blended perfectly with the sage, broth, and cornbread, adding depth no boxed version could match. That handful of walnuts was more than just flavor. It was Grandma's way of marking the dish as her own, a reminder that even the smallest choices could carry a piece of memory. If even one of these cookies made you taste a memory you did not know you missed, share your favorite in the comments and hit like and subscribe so we can keep bringing Grandma's Christmas magic back where it belongs.